Good morning, people. Oh, I only have two people today. Let's hope more of you show up. Bum, 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 bum.
Good morning.
Good morning, Celine. Morning, Bezowit. What time is it where you are, Bezowit? Bezowit.
Yeah,
What time is it where you are?
I'm in Plattsburgh. It's a 9:29.
You came all the way back to Plattsburgh?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. You should have stayed there for the semester. Do you have labs or something?
Yeah, I have labs, so I have to be here.
Bummer. Well, I hope things work out okay with your family.
Yeah, everything's okay for now, but
Good.
it's kind of hard where the
It's hard when you're this far away. God. You must feel like you've been torn apart after going all that way home and then all the way back in less than a week. Jeez, oh whiz.
Yeah, it was kind of hard.
Oh, if there's anything I can do, let me know. I doubt
Okay,
there's
well,
anything I can do.
thank you.
We only have 3 people today. Is everyone else mad at me or what? Let's wait a little bit. So let me tell you a story. I was talking to a friend of mine this week who has a friend who's I don't know if she's a teacher or a guidance counselor or something in a school, and for learning disabled and troubled kids and stuff. And there was this one kid who, had to be on the Zoom. So he's on the Zoom. And after a while, he's going like this. And they're like, oh my God, is there something wrong with his audio? We can't hear him anymore. And then every now and then he would just cut out and be gone. And it's like, oh, now his video's gone. What the hell happened? And he was just doing it because if you looked really close, you could see his hand reach up and slowly touch a button. And then boom, his computer isn't working anymore. Scamp.
Oh.
Wow, we only have 3 people today. Jeez, a whiz. Only the good people showed up. The bad people didn't come. Gave a talk last night at SUNY Orange on the Zoom. Psychedelics used for antidepressants. Pretty interesting talk. I'm going to load it up on YouTube eventually when I get around to it, if you're interested.
I'm gonna try to join the Zoom again because I can't see your faces. I don't know.
Okay. Okay. Hey, let's all leave while she's gone, and then she'll come back and she'll be like, "Where's everybody?" Oh God, I'm in the bedroom that I grew up in when I was a teenager, and now I'm suddenly a teenager again. Let's scam her. Let's do it. I remember having more hair when I used to live here. All right, we'll just wait for Bezowit, and when she comes back, we'll go ahead and start. We won't start without her. That would be rude. Give her a few minutes here. There she is. There she is. Good. She's back. All right, we're just going to go ahead and get started. I don't know how many people are going to show up today. So the exams are graded. Hopefully you had a chance to look at that. I didn't look at the overall grades. I just graded them and moved on. Hopefully everyone did well on the test. I guess I should check that out today. But anyway, be that as it may, we move on. Today we're going to be talking about the heart and the contraction of the kind of the whole heart. We looked at heart cells and how they contract. We're going to start looking today about the whole cell. Matka Mellon, thanks for coming, buddy. It's a skeleton crew today. Only the good people showed up. Am I right, Ariana? Ariana, when I say am I right, you always say yes. That's the drill here. Okay, where's my PowerPoint? Show all windows. Okay, so here's a really cool picture of the heart that I stole from the internet somewhere. I do have the link there, so it's not really stealing, but you get what I mean. And actually, anatomically, the heart looks more like this. This is exactly what the heart looks like. Just kidding. But actually, you can see like where you get this from. Here are the atria, right? And here's the apex of the ventricle. And it kind of does look like that, doesn't it? That's weird. That's why they use that shape as the heart. But hang on a sec. I want to pull my notes up at the same time so I'm not forgetting to say certain things. You can't see my notes, but did I upload them to Moodle? I will if I didn't. Oh, shoot.
All right. I think you did. I pulled them up.
Oh, good, good. So, like I say, this class is really kicking my butt because in years past, I would just stand up and draw a heart and talk about this stuff, and it would take me zero prep time. This lecture took me probably 10 hours to put together, and it's not that long. It's probably going to be a half an hour. I could make it a half hour if I run. I'm going to try and go slow. Okay, so let's, by a show of thumbs up, how many people have had A and P already?
I'm having it right now. Taking
Yeah.
it right now.
Oh, Ariana's had it already. All right, Ariana, why don't you teach this lecture? Because you probably know this anatomy stuff more than me. Oh, Celine does too. Which one of you wants to run us through this slide? Okay, I'll take that as a thumbs down. No, seriously, I've never had anatomy. I know the heart a bit because this was my focus in grad school, but I don't. I'm not an anatomist, that's for sure. But anyway, we've got our right atrium and our left atrium, right ventricle and left ventricle. And I swear to God, if I'm riding down the street, I always like put out my right hand and say, turn left over there. Because like my whole grad school was, this is the right, this is the left. Oh, there's Mike. Welcome, Michael. So I'm always, my left and right are always confused because I'm so used to looking at the heart from the doctor's side, not the patient side. But anyway, right atrial, right, left atria, right ventricle, left ventricle. So blood comes in through the superior and inferior vena cavas here into the atrium. And from the atrium, it goes down into the right ventricle. From the ventricle, and this valve here is important. This valve is the tricuspid valve, 3 heads, tricuspid valve. And then here is the semilunar valve. See, this is how well I know my anatomy. I'm checking my notes to make sure I don't say it wrong. So, pulmonary semilunar valve over here. And then here on the left side, you've got your mitral valve. That one's really important. We'll see that one screw up from time to time. And then here's your atrial semilunar valve here. Important structural things to note about the heart is the right side's got a much thinner wall than the left side. The left side's doing most of the work here. The right side's just pumping from where it is to like right and left to the lungs, whereas the left side of the heart has to pump it all the way up to your brain, which is higher, and to the rest of the body. So there's a lot more work being done here by the left side. And typically when you've got heart problems, it's the left side of the heart that's the problem. Although if you've got right side problems, that creates pulmonary hypertension, and that becomes a problem too. But mainly we're talking about our left ventricle here. These are your papillary muscles here, and they're attached by the chordae tendineae to the valves here, to the mitral valve here and the tricuspid valve here. And the whole idea with these is there's so much pressure building up in the ventricle that those valves, which are supposed to close like this, would prolapse, and then you wouldn't have a valve anymore. So that stops that from happening. I remember once, I'm gonna BS a lot today because I don't have a lot to fill in the time, but I was in on a a heart transplant once. One of the guys in my lab wanted some human heart tissue to isolate RNA and clone a protein. And so I, get the call at midnight, and at 2 a.m. they're pulling the heart out of this woman, and they gave it to, just plopped it in a stainless steel bucket and gave it to us. So we sat there with the razor blades and cut it all up into pieces. That was really exciting. But one woman in our lab wanted the papillary muscles. These guys here, she's doing experiments with that. That's neither here nor there. Okay, so I guess that's it for structure. Okay, let's talk about electrical conduction in the heart. Oh, yeah, this is here just to show, how the heart is actually situated. It is more on the left side than the right side, and it's kind of sitting at an angle like this. And when the blood's ejected from the left, it comes straight up this way. But anyway, this is the heart is at a bit of an angle. Okay, electrical pathways in the heart. So most important is this AV node, the SA node. SA node is here on the right atrium, and it is the pacemaker. It's what starts the action potential. And from here, the action potential will go cell to cell across the right atrium, and it'll also go through this Bachmann's bundle over to the left atrium. And then from there, it goes cell to cell. So remember, between our cardiac cells, we've got gap junctions that make them one big electrical syncytium. So once the action potential starts, it goes all the way through. But we do have electrical insulation here between the atria and the ventricle. So the impulse isn't going to go cell to cell to the ventricles as well. And that's really important because this action potential will come down through the atria and then hit this spot, which is the AV node, atrioventricular node. So the AV node has got really slow conduction velocity, which gives the atria time to contract before the ventricle contracts. You want those atria contracting first. So the impulse starts here, comes down to the SA node, and it slowly goes down the bundle of His, and then the right and left branch of the bundle of His. It's taking its time, comes down here, and now the conduction pathways of the Purkinje fibers spread it to the ventricular muscle, and then it goes cell to cell in the ventricular muscle. And the reason for this is, if you notice, you've got, your aorta is up here, and you want this thing contracting from the bottom up. If it contracted from the top down, then the pressure would kind of force the blood down before it came up, and that would be inefficient. So we start down here, and it squishes up. And I had a professor back in grad school say it almost like turns as it goes. So it's like wringing out a wet cloth. It kind of turns as it squeezes like this. So it's kind of wringing that blood out and squirting it up this way. So your conduction pathway then starts with the SA node, which is the pacemaker. And I need to talk about the electrical activity here too, but I haven't gotten that slide together yet. But here is your SA node, comes down to the AV node where it passes into the ventricle, comes down to the bottom of the ventricle, and then the excitation goes from the bottom up. Oops. Okay, so now this is the cardiac cycle, the pressure volume loop. So this is what we're going to spend the rest of the day on, talking about how this works. And it's all about pressure and the one-way valves. So the valves will always open, they'll always close when the pressure is higher inside the heart than outside the heart. Well, let's not be general, let's be more specific. Okay, so let's start at late diastole. So late diastole, mitral valve is right here. Ventricular filling, oh no, right, let's start here. Okay, so early diastole, so is just started, diastole is just started. So diastole is rest, systole is contract. So right here, the pressure in the ventricle drops below the pressure in the atria. So during the contraction of the heart, blood is still coming into the atria. So blood is built up in the atria. So there's a bit of pressure there in the atria. And as the ventricle relaxes, pressure drops in the ventricle, isovolumic, it's not changing size, but it's dropping pressure. And then the pressure drops below the pressure in the atria, and that, I keep messing up my valves, the tricuspid valve opens, and then blood starts to flow into the ventricle from the atrium. And you've got a lot of stretch of the ventricle at this point. It's a very stretchy muscle. So pressure is increasing a little bit, but not a lot, because that ventricle is really stretching out to accept that blood. And then the electrical activity hits the ventricle here, and it begins to contract. As it's contracting, it's isovolumic again, because you've got your tricuspid valve will close. No, wait. If I'm looking at the left side of the heart, it's the mitral valve over here. I'm sorry. So right here, as pressure starts to increase in the left ventricle, the mitral valve will close, and the aortic semilunar valve is still closed. So you've got this isovolumic increase in pressure in the ventricle to a certain point. And at that point, the pressure in the ventricle gets higher than the pressure in the aorta, and that semilunar valve snaps open, and whoosh, you get a lot of blood coming out all at once. So they talk about the fast ejection versus the slow ejection. This is the fast ejection. A whole lot of blood comes out at once. Now, as you go through this systole, there's still blood. You can see your volume is decreasing as we go this way, which means you're still ejecting blood, but the muscle starts to get weaker and weaker as it's getting towards the end of that systole. More and more cells are going into refractory period. So there's less contraction. And then when you hit here, the cells are just going into relaxation. So now the ventricle has stopped contracting, and the pressure drops in the ventricle, and the pressure in the aorta is higher than in the ventricle. So now that aortic semilunar valve snaps closed, and we get this isovolumic relaxation. So the volume in the ventricle is staying constant because the pressure is higher in the ventricle than it is in the atria. And then you get down here, and the pressure in the ventricle drops below the atrium, and then we start filling again, and that ventricle stretching out again. So let me just go around that circle again one more time. You get, so at the beginning of diastole, the pressure in the, actually, this is the beginning of diastole here. The pressure in the ventricle is higher than in the atria, so you get isovolumic relaxation. Then the pressure in the ventricle drops below the atria, so you get increase in volume with not much increase in pressure because you're stretching out a lot. Systole starts here, isovolumic contraction against that volume until the pressure is higher than it is in the aorta. And then fast ejection of blood, slower ejection of blood. Now the cells are starting to stop contracting, and pressure drops below the pressure in the aorta, and that semilunar valve snaps shut, and we start over again. So that's our pressure volume loop. Here is another way of looking at it. So this is pressure, depending on where you're looking, and against time. So this is aorta, this is the ventricle, and this is the atria. We're not going to worry about the atria right now, but here is pressure in the ventricle. So you can see pressure going up a little bit as the atria contract, and then the ventricle starts to contract and pressure goes up, 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 up. Right here, your semilunar valve opens, and so the pressure in the aorta goes up, and pressure in the ventricle goes up until the cells start to relax. Now it starts to come down, and boom, right here, the semilunar valves close. And then you get this little dicrotic notch here. And that's because of the valve closing, and the blood kind of swooshes against the closed valve, and that increases the pressure slightly. And then you get your decrease in pressure in the ventricle down to diastole levels. So here's your diastolic pressure, and here's your systolic pressure, 80/20. And heart sounds. Pressure increases in the ventricle to the point that you snap open those semilunar valves, and that's your first heart sound, lub. We call it lub in the business. And then pressure increases, pressure decreases, and at this point, pressure is higher in the aorta than in the ventricle, and the semilunar valve snaps shut, and that's the second heart sound. That's your dub, lub dub, lub dub, lub dub, lub dub. Okay, so what else did I want to say? Oh, so here, thing about this aorta is, remember we talked on Tuesday about the structure of vessels. The aorta is your biggest vessel. They call it a capacitance vessel, not a resistance vessel. Capacitance because like a capacitor, during this contraction, it's swelling up and saving some of that energy from the heart. And then when the valve shuts, it releases that energy again. So it's recoiling against. So that's a lot of what this dicrotic notch is here. And also this slow slope down. If this was like a metal pipe, it would go from here straight up to here, over, and then straight down, and then over. There would be no sweep like this. So that's that kind of slow decrease in pressure from 120 to 80 is about, the aorta stretching and then recoiling on that stretch. And that's going to decrease your pulse pressure. We'll talk about that hopefully in the next class. Okay, so EKG. EKG was, or ECG, you could use, I think today they use ECG more, EKG originally, because the guy who came up with it was German. And the guy's name was Einthoven. And basically what he did was put his dog in some water. I always love this picture. It's like look at the dog. He's like, now I'm doing this. What the hell? It's 11. But basically it's like, the original idea was you just put a lead on each arm and one on the bottom, and then that way, your body, because it's all electrolytes, the electrical changes from your heart will be transmitted through the rest of your body, and you can pick them up. And say if you compare this lead to this lead, you're watching the voltage pass across the heart in this direction. This lead to this lead is watching it go this way. So all together, what you're doing is measuring the voltage changes across the heart in 3 different directions. And that's what gives you your EKG. And today, well, not today, but this is the original theory. And now this last lead here, they put in different places to look at different parts of the heart. So you can see, you've got these 2 leads, and then you've got about, 5 or 6 leads coming across this way, just to get a finer tune on what's going on in the ventricle. So this is your big EKG from just the 3 main leads. So what's going on here? You've got your P wave here. Hang on a second. Let me pull my notes up to make sure I don't mess this up. I do know this, but this is not anatomy. Okay, so P wave, depolarization of the atria. So you can watch that depolarization sweep from the SA node across all the atria. And then this here, PR segment, is the slowdown of the transmission down from the AV node down the bundle of His down to the bottom of the heart. And so atria contracts, the impulse takes a little time to get to the bottom of the heart, and then here QRS is the depolarization of the ventricle, and then the ST segment here is during systole, and then you get repolarization of the ventricle. And so so depolarization of the atria, and then your repolarization of the atria will be in here, but it gets covered up because the ventricle is so much bigger, so you don't see it really. And then you get the depolarization of the ventricle, and then the repolarization of the ventricle. Oh, here it is. P wave, atria, PR interval, delay for the AV node, QRS complex, is the depolarization of ventricles, triggering the main pumping contractions. ST segment, beginning of ventricle repolarization, which should be flat. And then the T wave ventricular repolarization. Okay, so now let's line it up with, I'm going to go big here. Go big or go home. I'm already home. So line it up with the heart. So remember, the contraction is going to be slightly behind the excitation. As the action potential goes over, we're getting that spill of calcium out of the ryanodine receptor. So it's going to be a few milliseconds behind the excitation. So your SA node depolarizes. Oops, oh shit, stop that. It spreads over the atria. Here comes the SA node. Now we're in this segment where it's in the AV node, coming down here. So this little thing here, we've got it coming down the bundle of His and back up the bottom from the Purkinje fiber. So now you've got a lot of muscle depolarizing here. So we're going to start with our upsweep, and then boom, all the ventricle is engaged here, or is depolarized, and so that's our big QRS sweep, and then the ventricle will repolarize. Okay, so putting it all into one thing, let's watch this for a little bit. So here's atrial. I wish I could, oh, I can pause this, wait a minute. Oh shit, that wasn't supposed to happen. I thought there was a pause button here. Well, anyway, in this thing you can watch, oh, you probably can't see it. So in this thing, you can watch the actual function of the heart and the opening and closing of the valves, and line it up with the EKG, with the pressure in the aorta and the pressure in the ventricles. Let's see, hang on. I think there was a pause button here. There it is. All right, so let's watch this from the beginning. Okay, so here we are creeping up on our first systole. Pause. So there, the atria is contracting, or is depolarizing. Here's your atrial contraction here, which you can see from the atrial pressure is happening here. So your depolarization's here, and the atrial pressure increases a little bit later. There's the peak of your QRS. There's your peak, the peak of your QRS, and a little bit behind that now is going to be the contraction of the ventricle. And right there, your ventricle is repolarizing, and you can see pressure is dropping in the ventricle because you're going into diastole. Here's another thing we're going to be talking about soon, so let's look at it on the bottom. The volume in the ventricle. EDV is end diastolic volume, ESV is end systolic volume. Those are really important concepts that we'll talk about soon. So the volume in the ventricle is isovolumic here, right? And now here it starts to fill, so the volume goes up, and then it starts to contract and volume goes down, 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 down. And here's early diastole when that extra blood in the ventricle, in the atria flood in, your volume goes up. And here's contraction of the atria again, volume goes up. So there's your stroke volume between end diastolic volume and end systolic volume. Love dub, love dub. This is really cool because you can watch your valves open too. Lub dub. Okay. Okay. Can I see your faces real quick? Here we are. All right. So I hate to admit it, but that's all I got for today. Took a lot to put that together. I think I'm going to have to find a different way to lecture because there's so much to putting into these short lectures that I don't think I'm giving you enough information per class. So, and maybe we'll do a paper next week too, probably on Thursday. I'll get you a paper. We'll do another lecture on Tuesday, and then we'll have a paper for Thursday just to kind of use some of these concepts in an actual published report. So, all right. I hate to tell you guys, but that's all I got today. Everybody happy? How many people are happy? Okay. Okay, guys. Talk to you later.